Good day, dear students. Today we are going to continue our discussions regarding the different topics under the subject professional ethics or computer ethics. Today's lesson is all about the finalist theorist. First, let's take a look at the objectives of the said lesson. First objective is to discuss the difference between the preliminary theorist and the finalist theorist as ways of classifying ethical system, and secondly, to apply to computing the philosophies of Mill, Kant, and Aristotle. What are the topics being covered in this lesson? First is John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism, or the theory of utilitarianism. Second is Kant's categorical imperatives. Next, we have Aristotle's Nicomachean ethics, which would be the last uh, philosophy that we are going to discuss, or the last theory that we are going to discuss under the finalist theories. This lesson will provide you with some basic knowledge of the finalist theories, particularly the philosophies of John Stuart Mill, Immanuel Kant, and Aristotle. This will enable you to comprehend and apply ethical theories and principles to issues affecting computing. First, let's discuss John Stuart Mill's utilitarianism. When a man regards a particular human action as good or bad, depending upon whether or not the said human action brings happiness, then he subscribes to the theory of utilitarianism. Popularly known as the greatest happiness principle, utilitarianism holds that the happiness is the very yardstick of morality. So to discuss further, those actions that bring happiness are considered morally right, while those actions that inhibit happiness are considered morally wrong. So let's take a look at Mill's explanation about utilitarianism. As Mill stated in his work Utilitarianism, the creed which accepts as the foundation of morals, utility or the greatest happiness principle, holds that actions are right in proportion as they tend to promote happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. By happiness is intended pleasure and the absence of pain, while by unhappiness, pain and the privation of pleasure. From this point of view, actions are either inherently pleasurable or merely instrumental. As Leonardo de Castro in his book Ethics and Logic Basic Concepts states, things may be valued for their own sake or because they are instrumental in attaining an end. Therefore, since these things are valued for the sake of ends other than themselves, they are said to have instrumental value. On the other hand, happiness is not valued for something after than itself. It is valued for its own sake. Let's take a look at this example. Franz is a young and vibrant newly graduated computer scientist. When asked why he always spends extra hours in the office working, despite the fact that he is not entitled to overtime pay, Franz replies that he loves his work and he does not want paperwork piling up on his desk. Franz is asked why he loves his work and why he does not want pending work on his desk. Franz replies that he wants to excel in his professional career as a computer scientist. Again, he is asked, why do you want to excel in your professional career? Franz says that he wants to get recognition and promotion. Why? Franz replies that this would lead to fame and fortune, which would make him happy. When asked why he wants to be happy, Franz says nothing. To elaborate further, we have example number 2. Julius is a computer buff. As such, he loves exploring computers and computer applications. Julius is particularly hooked in the internet. He spends a lot of time and energy surfing websites and engaging in chatting. When asked why, Julius replies, I want to enhance my knowledge. Asked why he wants to enhance his knowledge, Julius answers, I want to excel in school. He wants to do this because he wants his parents to be proud of him. When asked why, Julius says he wants his parents to be proud of him so they will reward him and give him what he wants. And why do you want your parents to give you what you want? Julius is asked. Because I want to be happy, Julius answered. If we try to examine the above examples, we will observe that for every human action, there is always a corresponding end aimed for. Neither Franz or Julius acts without any end in mind. Such actions are deemed valuable because they are used as means to ends, thus, they are actions that are instrumentally good. Notice that for both Franz and Julius, happiness is the ultimate end. Therefore, happiness is their final end. The examples illustrate that what some philosophers consider to be man's natural propensity of happiness. We cannot help but desire to be happy, which is also the very reason for seeking it. And because it is sought for its own sake and not for another, it possesses inherent value. According to Mill, the only things that are desirable as ends are pleasure and freedom from pain. Things are desirable either for the pleasure that is innate in them or as instrument to attain pleasure and avoid pain. Here, the value of an action derives from its consequences. An action is a means towards a consequence, which is always directed towards pleasure and the avoidance of pain. According to Mill, the ultimate end, with reference to and for the sake of which all other things are desirable, whether we are considering our own good or that of other people, is an existence exempt as far as possible from pain and as rich as possible as enjoyment. This is the reason why Mill's utilitarianism is also referred to as pleasure utilitarianism. If you are going to argue that pleasure and the avoidance of pain are not always the ends of man's action, considering that there are people who voluntarily submit themselves to pain or expose them to it, think again. To counter your argument, it may be averred that such people voluntarily submit themselves to pain or expose themselves to it because they derive pleasure from doing so. Meaning, pain brings them happiness. This conclusion is consistent with Mill's assertion that questions of ultimate ends are not amenable to direct proof. Whatever can be proved to be good must be so by showing to be the means to something admitted to be good without proof. That is, if those people attest to have gained pleasure out of their presumed painful experience, we cannot oppose their claim. It is possible that there are people who indeed get pleasure through pain. Mill recognized the act of sacrifice as means toward an end. He, however, warns that the sacrifice that does not contribute to the propagation of the greatest good, which is pleasure or happiness, to the greatest number is not value. The utilitarian morality does not recognize in human beings the power of sacrificing their own greatest good for the good of others. It only refuses to admit that the sacrifice itself, good, a sacrifice which does not increase or tend to increase the sum total of the happiness is considered wasted. The only self-renunciation which it applauds is devotion to the happiness or to some of the means of happiness of others, either of mankind collectively or of individual within the limits imposed by the collective interest of mankind. So let's take this example. Juan, whose virus scanner had yet to be updated and was therefore not operational, took the risk of downloading an email from an unknown sender. The email claimed to contain tips on how to increase one's finances. Thinking that he might help his parents in their financial concerns, Juan opened the file although he was aware of the risk of contaminating the computer system with a virus infection. Juan explored the website that the sender suggested. Suddenly, his computer began having trouble. A rare computer virus infected the hardware of his computer, causing all of his files, including software, to be deleted. His siblings were dismayed that they could no longer use the computer. In this case, Juan's original intent was to help his parents. However, his act of taking a risk and hence sacrificing not only of his own welfare but also that of his siblings undermines the value of that intent. Instead of increasing or tending to increase the attainment of happiness with his family, his act even brought displeasure and inconvenience. So, how do we judge and measure the quality of pleasure then? Mill avers that between two pleasures, the one that should be given a decided preference is the more desirable pleasure. Mill wrote, "If I am asked what I mean by difference of quality in pleasure, or what makes one pleasure more valuable than another, merely as a pleasure, except its being greater in amount, there is but one possible answer of two pleasures. If there be one to which all or almost all who have experience of both give a decided preference, irrespective of any feelings of moral obligation to prefer it, that is the more desirable pleasure." If one of the two is, by those who are competently acquainted with both, placed so far above the other that they prefer it, even though knowing it to be attended with a greater amount of discontent, and would not resign it for any quantity of the other pleasure which their nature is capable of, we are justified to ascribing to the preferred enjoyment a superiority in quality, so far outweighing quantity as to render it, in comparison, of small account. So let's take this example. Miss D is both a computer scientist and a medical practitioner. She enjoys and gets pleasure from practicing both of her professions. But when asked which of her two professions she thinks is more desirable, Miss D says being a computer scientist, since Miss D has experienced both of the pleasure of computing and the pleasure of healing. She is in a position to determine which of the two is more desirable. Therefore, the criterion for judging which pleasure is better than another must be made by the judge who has experienced both kinds of pleasure. In resolving the issue of what sort of proof the principle of utility is susceptible to, Mill avers, if the opinion which I have now stated is psychologically true, if human nature is so constituted as to desire nothing which is not either a part of happiness or a means of happiness, we can have no other proof, and we require no other that these are the only things desirable. If so, happiness is the sole end of human conduct, from whence it necessarily follows that it must be the criterion of morality, since a part is included in the whole. In sum, the theory of utilitarianism is an area of ethical philosophy that plays an essential role in encouraging adherents of morality to focus on the determination of ethical standards that would more or less afford universal acceptance. You may utilize this theory as a guide in your study of the moral and ethical issues surrounding computing as an area of human concern. Next up, we will be discussing about Immanuel Kant's categorical imperativeness.